Hello, thank you for being here. We're delighted to have you. I love talking about some of the intriguing things I've found in the Champagne region. There is so much beauty and history there. Looking at 200 years of widows gives us a much different picture than we usually see. And of course, we'll start with Veuve Clicquot, and Veuve means widow. Have you read the book or watched the film about Veuve Clicquot? Before I do that, I've been asked to tell you a little bit about myself first and how I came to write about the widows. The first thing to know, I guess, is what lenses I use. And there are three of them: language, law, and heritage. I've studied French, German, and Slovenian at universities in Colorado, Michigan, Germany, and Slovenia, and a little Greek at a summer program in Greece. I got my law degree at Stanford. I've worked in a private firm as assistant city attorney in San Jose, small claims court judge, teacher, arbitrator. As to my heritage, all four grandparents immigrated from Slovenia before the World Wars, and I search to understand why. The second thing to know is that my books have led me where I am. In the year 2000, I started writing books, and I've written 10 since then. I started out by looking at my favorite places. The shores of Lake Michigan led me to parks, inland lakes, and geology. Slovenia led me to alpine wonders, ancient trade routes, family domains, hot springs resorts. In France, I started to realize the importance of underground sanctuaries to the survival of our ancestors throughout time. During my work in the Champagne region, I began to see hidden women. My research has led us on a magical odyssey with stunning people and landscapes. I've seen the beauty of things I thought were ugly and the bad in things I thought were good. Imaging helps us see places we couldn't before, and archaeology lets us see through layers of deception. With this presentation, I'd like to take you through some of my discovery process. I'll just say one last thing about my books. For me, publishing has been a multinational effort, much like Champagne. Blair and I set up Lexicus Press to publish the first one. The second book is now in its second edition. It was published in Slovenia. The third and fourth books were published in Germany about France. All 6 Hidden Women books are available on Amazon, American, French, German, and British Amazon, in ebook, paperback, or hardcover form. The first book in the series is available on the website www.hiddenwomenbooks.com in French, German, and Slovenian at no cost. You can find all 6 Hidden Women books on academia.edu, also on a complimentary basis. I'll be talking about 4 widows in the context of Champagne. The first born in 1777, the last died in 1977. Veuve Clicquot was the first Champagne widow, and Veuve Pommery was the second widow. I'll be talking mainly about these first 2 widows, but I discuss all 4 of them in greater detail in my book, Champagne Regained. It took 2 years, but we gained access to Veuve Clicquot's cellars, now owned by the Chamber of Commerce. The cellars are part of a network of tunnels under the city of Reims and resulted from extensive mining of limestone and chalk. The mineral deposits that were mined are part of a geologic formation that stretches from the White Cliffs of Dover all the way to Eastern Europe. This area, known as the Paris Basin, was once covered by shallow seas and lakes. Champagne cellars changed the concept of farming. They added art and glamour to the grape. In the early 20th century, champagne posters contributed to the mystique of the drink in ways that had been impossible in Europe for many centuries. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The Champagne region is an hour east of Paris. There's a TGV to Reims that takes about an hour. Before we look at the 200 years of widows, I'd like to talk about a time much further back, a medieval tradition that brought all of Europe to the little town of Troyes in the Champagne region. The Champagne fairs, they had nothing to do with champagne the drink. These fairs drew people from textile centers like Brussels, Krakow, and Melrose, England. Medieval travelers stored unsold wares in houses they'd come back to year after year. The town flourished from long-distance trade, and it was famous for its coinage and credit. Troyes, the little town of Troyes, is what enticed me to look at the Champagne region, because it is an amazingly intact medieval gem. Its half-timbered houses and narrow, winding pedestrian streets give a rare view into the Middle Ages. Today, the city's best known for champagne, the drink, are Reims and Épernay. But in ancient days, Troyes was an epicenter of the textile trade. The Abbé du Loup in Troyes, the Abbey of the Wolf, was a secular abbey with renowned library and scriptorium. In exploring Troyes and its cultural riches, I also found troubling reports of expulsions and a very dark side of the late Middle Ages. Let me explain briefly. You're looking at the Maison des Allemands down a very narrow street in the heart of the oldest part of the city of Troyes. This is where an oppidum, or ancient Celtic fortress, used to be. It's also the old Jewish quarter. Now let's cut to the Middle Ages in Troyes, some centuries later, when Troyes suffered huge losses, hundreds of thousands of people expelled from Troyes, and the champagne fairs shut down. Troyes plunged from famous to unknown. I'll leave you with that thought, and we'll talk about this further in a future clip. But why, as a conqueror, do you have to kill the goose that lays your golden eggs? Women suffered in particular during the brutalities carried out under the Roman heresy laws. Joan of Arc is still an iconic symbol of those times, in the 14th century. Places that contain a reference to these women, like Frauenstein and Baume les Dames, offered sanctuary for women. Let's fast forward through the Champagne region's centuries of recovery to the advent of widows who began experimenting with grapes. Remember that the Champagne region used to mean textiles. The widows made it mean grapes and turned subterranean wastelands into their fermentation cellars. Here you see the home where Veuve Clicquot was married, in the cellars beneath her family home. In those tumultuous times, she'd been sent away from home as a young child and pretended to be the daughter of farmers for many years. She was married underground for safety precautions in the cellars. Barbe Nicole was 12 years old when the French Revolution began, stoked by the revolution in the U.S. against the British king. For more on this subject, I invite you to see my film clip, Liberty for All, that premiered for the Alliance Française of Silicon Valley. It's on my YouTube channel and features French and American philosophers, notably abolitionist Thomas Paine. This is how it looks above ground in Veuve Clicquot's childhood home. You'd never know the cellars were underneath. Veuve Clicquot managed to convince her father-in-law not to sell off her husband's vineyards and to let her manage them. Then, as the story goes, she drilled holes in her kitchen table to develop the process of riddling. Why? Because the champagne wine, as it was called, was murky, dirty pink, full of sediment. So Veuve Clicquot put the bottles upside down in her table and captured that sediment in the neck of the bottle, pulled out that plug, and replaced it with cognac and sugar. Veuve Clicquot's husband's friends made a European success of her new sparkling clear drink, particularly in Russia. Riddling racks like these became universally used in the champagne business. Now mechanized means are used to riddle the bottles to catch the sediment in the neck of the bottle, but smaller champagne cellars still use this method. Early on, no one thought you could grow grapes so far north. It takes longer for the grapes to ripen, and the soil is chalky. It doesn't hold moisture. So champagne has to be fermented twice, once in the vat, once in the bottle. Champagne grapes are picked by hand and fermented with the stems and seeds that rise to the top, called the chapeau. At first, everyone tried to get these bubbles out of the wine because they were big and gloppy, called the yeux de crapaud, toad's eyes. Veuve Clicquot had turned east to Russia for her trade. Veuve Pommery had studied in England, so she set up an office in London. Jean Pommery. She lost her husband when Veuve Clicquot was still alive. The House of Pommery was founded in 1858, with their primary business being wool trading. It was this second widow, Pommery, who introduced elegance into the drink. She made champagne the drink of celebration. Veuve Clicquot had added cognac and sugar to make a sticky sweet drink. Veuve Pommery tried a different tack. She added last year's vintage and developed Brut, B-R-U-T. She invited all her friends to come over and try her new invention. The first reaction, it's a bit harsh, don't you think? But by the second glass, she won everyone over. We had the chance to stay in Veuve Pommery's house in Chigny-les-Roses when I was researching the book. The hospitality that was shown us was the tradition of that household, I'm sure, and it was in a park-like setting. Both of the first two widows, Veuve Clicquot and Pommery, provided food and lodging for their workers, and a great celebration at the end of the harvest called the cochon. All workers were sent home with bottles from the previous year. Reims is full of underground tunnels. The area sits on a chalk deposit that is porous and does not hold water, so it doesn't grow mold. The cellars hold a constant temperature, and those conditions are perfect for fermenting the bottles of champagne for the second fermentation. Veuve Pommery's champagne cellars did not look anything like a farm. She used the cellars for art exhibits. Pommery champagne cellars added new spirit to wine production, an air of celebration. Veuve Pommery recaptured past grandeur above and below the ground. The underground labyrinth that had been used for textile storage became the perfect place for the fermentation of champagne, and she used the beauty of grapes as a subject matter for art. We first saw old traces of mines in Champagne's capital city of Reims, and it was a revelation to us. These underground spaces reflected great engineering and scientific expertise. Veuve Pommery's art and architecture seemed to evoke ancient traditions. When we first made a reservation to visit the Pommery champagne cellars, I didn't know that Pommery was a woman. We walked into a huge antechamber with an immense barrel in it and wood sculptures decorating the face of it. I took a photo without even realizing the significance of it until much later. The third widow, Mathilde Laurent-Perrier, developed a trade with Britain after the war. During World War I, the women stayed underground during the day and worked the vineyards at night because the husbands were off at war. Surprisingly, the best vintage ever produced of champagne is said to have come from that era. The Nonancourt family fought as a part of the resistance in World War II. Lily Boulanger took over the champagne business during World War II when the area was occupied by Germans. She helped her employees and nursed the wounded. We'll come back to Lily Boulanger in a minute, but I want to say first a couple words about Champagne itself. The Champagne region requires that only 3 kinds of grapes be used: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. Champagne can be made from only 1, 2, or 3 in any combination. In order to be called Grand Cru, which is the highest designation for grape quality, all grapes used must be grown in vineyards that bear the Grand Cru designation. There are cooperatives that crush all Grand Cru grapes. Believe it or not, the town of Bouzy near Reims is known for the best Pinot Noir grapes. In order to be called Champagne, all grapes must be grown, bottled, and fermented within the Champagne region, and only Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier grapes may be used. Over 2,500 businesses now thrive in champagne production, with more than 10,000 labels. This depiction of a woman would have been heresy under the Roman church laws, punishable by death. Until the French Revolution, most of the land in the Champagne region was owned by the church. The French Revolution took place at the end of the 18th century. Under the church state, the only depictions of women could be the Virgin Mother and saints, with heads bowed and eyes down. The Champagne widows helped to elevate effervescence. What happened to the champagne houses the widows built? If you ask for the Veuve, you'll get a glass of Veuve Clicquot. The champagne cellars of Laurent-Perrier initiated a scholarship program this year to further the career development of women in the wine industry. Boulanger is still family owned. Let me end with my favorite quote from Lily Boulanger, the fourth widow. I drink champagne when I'm happy and when I'm sad. Sometimes I drink it when I'm alone. When I have company, I consider it obligatory. Otherwise, I never touch it, unless I'm thirsty. Thank you very much.